Emily and Daniel Carter were the couple everyone envied, successful, beautiful, and inseparable. But one Halloween night, at a crowded neighborhood party, Emily discovered a secret that shattered everything she thought she knew. Her husband's affair wasn't with another woman, it was with his best friend, Ryan. What began as a night of laughter ended in a storm of betrayal, obsession, and bloodshed that would shock their entire community and leave everyone asking, how far can love twist before it turns into something deadly? Emily Carter spent the whole afternoon preparing for the neighborhood Halloween party, unaware that the night would change her life forever. The Carters had always been known as the couple everyone admired, successful, charming, and seemingly inseparable. Emily was proud of her marriage to Daniel, a man who could light up any room with his smile and charm. Their friends often joked that they were made for each other, and Emily believed it too. She had spent years building a life that felt stable and full of love, never doubting Daniel's loyalty. When she slipped into her elegant black dress and glanced at their wedding photo on the dresser, she smiled to herself, feeling grateful. The party was being hosted by Ryan Miller, Daniel's best friend since college. Ryan had always been part of their story. He was the one who had introduced them, the one who had toasted them at their wedding, and the one who always seemed to know when Daniel needed advice or a good laugh. Emily trusted him as much as she trusted Daniel. To her, Ryan was family. When Daniel came downstairs in a matching costume to Ryan, as something they had planned together without telling Hirsch, she laughed politely, though something about it felt off. The identical pirate outfits drew attention, and the two men seemed to bask in the spotlight. Emily brushed it aside, reminding herself it was just a silly coincidence. The night was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of autumn air. Neighbors mingled in groups, sipping drinks and taking photos, while Daniel and Ryan stayed close, sharing quiet jokes and playful glances. At first, Emily admired their friendship, but as the hours passed, her smile began to fade. She noticed how Daniel's hand would linger a little too long on Ryan's shoulder, how their laughter seemed private, different from the easy friendship she remembered. Whenever she tried to join their conversation, they exchanged quick looks, as if sharing a secret she wasn't meant to hear. Emily tried to ignore the growing unease. She told herself she was being paranoid, that it was only her imagination playing tricks. Yet every time she caught them whispering together, her chest tightened. It wasn't jealousy that she felt, it was confusion, a slow, creeping realization that something was being hidden from her. She walked out to the backyard for air, feeling the cold breeze brush her skin as she tried to calm her thoughts. From where she stood, she could see them through the window, Daniel's hand briefly touching Ryan's arm, their eyes meeting in a way that made her heart sink. The laughter inside the house grew louder, but Emily barely heard it. For the first time in her marriage, she felt like an outsider. The warmth she once felt when she looked at Daniel had turned to doubt. She wanted to believe it was nothing, that tomorrow everything would return to normal. But deep inside, she knew something had shifted that night, something she couldn't explain but would soon uncover in the most devastating way possible. The morning after the Halloween party was heavy with silence. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, but the warmth that once filled their home had vanished. Emily sat at the edge of the bed, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had followed her through the night. Daniel was in the shower, humming softly as if nothing had happened. She wanted to believe everything was fine, that her suspicions were just the result of exhaustion and too much wine. But her instincts wouldn't rest. Every smile Daniel gave her now felt rehearsed. Every casual touch seemed forced. Something deep inside whispered that the man she thought she knew was hiding a truth that would destroy her. When Daniel left for work, Emily began cleaning the house, trying to distract herself. She picked up scattered decorations from the party, sorted through laundry, and wiped the kitchen counter. Then she noticed Daniel's phone lying beside the coffee machine. It was unlocked, as if waiting for her. For a moment, she hesitated. She had never snooped through his things before. Their marriage was built on trust, or at least that's what she believed. But the unease gnawed at her until curiosity became unbearable. Her hands trembled as she picked it up and opened the message app. At first, it was harmless work chats, group messages, random jokes. But then she saw Ryan's name. Her breath caught as she scrolled through hundreds of messages, each one more intimate than the last. There were secret meets, hidden inside jokes, and confessions of feelings that had gone far beyond friendship. Emily's vision blurred as she read Daniel's words, his declarations of love, his promises of secrecy. Ryan's replies mirrored them, filled with affection and longing. The two men had been seeing each other for months, slipping away under her nose while she believed her husband was staying late at the office or meeting clients for dinner. The realization hit like a physical blow. Emily dropped the phone, her knees giving out as she sank to the floor. Her mind raced through memories that suddenly felt corrupted. The nights Daniel came home late. The weekends he spent helping Ryan with house projects. The way they looked at each other at gatherings, it all fit together now like pieces of a cruel puzzle. Her heart felt shattered beyond repair. When Daniel came home that evening, she waited for him in silence. Her eyes were red, her body still trembling from shock. He froze the moment he saw his phone in her hand. The truth was written on his face before she said a word. There was no denial, no excuses, just a quiet confession that tore what little was left of her world apart. He said it had started with emotional closeness, something they hadn't meant to happen, but it had grown into something neither could stop. Emily felt numb. Betrayal didn't even feel like the right word. She was not only losing her husband, but also the friend she had trusted most. That night, she packed a small suitcase, walked out the door, and didn't look back. She told herself she was leaving the pain behind, but she didn't realize the storm inside her was only beginning. The days that followed blurred into one another, each one heavier than the last. Emily stayed with her sister in a small apartment across town, but she couldn't escape the shadow of what had happened. The betrayal played in her mind like a film on repeat, every scene sharper than the last. She barely slept, barely ate, and spent hours scrolling through old photos of her and Daniel, trying to understand when everything had gone wrong. Friends reached out, offering sympathy that only made her feel worse. She didn't want pity. She wanted answers, something to make sense of the destruction of the life she had built. The news of Daniel and Ryan moving in together reached her sooner than she expected. It spread quietly through mutual friends, carried by whispers and pitying glances. The idea of them sharing a home, living freely after the lies they had told, made Emily's stomach twist with rage. She felt humiliated, like the entire world knew her private pain. People avoided eye contact when she went grocery shopping, as if she were contagious with heartbreak. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she wasn't just hurt, she was furious. She had been made into the fool in a story everyone was now talking about. As the weeks passed, her sorrow hardened into obsession. She found herself checking Daniel's social media late at night, looking for signs of guilt or remorse. Instead, she saw smiling photos, parties, and cheerful comments. Every image felt like a slap to the face. Daniel and Ryan appeared happier than ever, while she was left broken and alone. Emily began driving past their house in the evenings, parking far enough away to remain unseen. The lights inside glowed warmly, and sometimes she could hear faint laughter drifting through the open windows. The sound tore through her chest. She told herself she only wanted closure, but deep down, something darker was taking root, a desire to make them feel the pain she carried. One night, while watching them from her car, she noticed Daniel's arm wrapped around Ryan's shoulder. The sight made her hands shake. The man who once swore eternal love to her now shared those same gestures with someone else, someone she had trusted like a brother. It wasn't only a romantic betrayal, it was the collapse of her entire world. She began to write in a journal, filling pages with anger, confusion, and a growing thirst for justice. Her thoughts became consumed by them, and the idea of confrontation turned into a nightly fantasy she replayed again and again. When Emily purchased a small handgun, she told herself it was only for protection, but in truth, it was a physical manifestation of everything she felt: fear, rage, helplessness. She kept it hidden in her dresser drawer, but she often took it out just to hold it, feeling its weight in her hands. It gave her a strange sense of control, something she hadn't felt in months. The pain that had once left her sobbing now simmered into something else entirely. And as the date of Ryan's upcoming celebration approached, the same kind of party where her life had fallen apart, she began to believe fate was offering her one last chance to reclaim her dignity, no matter the cost. The night of Ryan's promotion party arrived under a sky that seemed to calm for what was about to unfold. Emily sat in her car parked a short distance away from the house, her heart thudding like a drum in her chest. The glow of the house spilled across the driveway, laughter and music seeping through the open windows. From the outside it looked like any other celebration, friends drinking, talking, dancing, but to Emily, it was a cruel reminder of the world that had been taken from her. Every burst of laughter felt like an echo of her humiliation. She had spent weeks convincing herself she was only there to confront them, to make them face the pain they caused. But as she stared through the windshield, gripping the gun in her lap, even she no longer believed that. Inside, Daniel and Ryan were the center of attention, surrounded by smiling faces and clinking glasses. They looked radiant, alive, unbothered by the destruction they had left behind. Emily watched from the shadows, the anger in her chest burning hotter with every passing second. The image of Daniel's hand on Ryan's back sent a cold wave through her. She had loved him, trusted him, built her life around him, and now, all that remained was this hollow ache that refused to fade. The thought that they could celebrate openly while she suffered alone felt unbearable. Her breathing grew uneven as she stepped out of the car. The air was cold and sharp, stinging her skin. She walked toward the house, her heels crunching softly against the gravel. The sound of music grew louder with each step, blending with the faint hum of voices inside. When she reached the door, it wasn't locked. She pushed it open and stepped inside, unnoticed at first. The warm light washed over her face, but she felt detached from the world around her, as though she were walking through a dream. Then someone spotted her, and the music faltered. Conversations stopped. All eyes turned toward her. Daniel froze mid-laugh when he saw her. His expression changed from surprise to panic and a heartbeat. Ryan's smile faded, and the color drained from his face. The room fell silent. Emily stood motionless in the doorway, her eyes glistening with tears, her grip tightening around the weapon hidden by her coat. For a long moment, no one moved. The tension in the room was suffocating. In that stillness, something inside her broke. The first gunshot shattered the air, a deafening crack that silenced the screams before they began. Ryan stumbled backward, collapsing to the floor, shock frozen on his face. Daniel shouted something, stepping forward, but the second shot rang out before he reached her. He fell beside his best friend, blood spreading fast across the polished floor. Emily stood there trembling, her arm lowering slowly. The sound of terrified cries filled the room, but she heard nothing. It was as if the world had gone silent, the chaos fading into a distant hum. Her eyes drifted between the two bodies, her face blank, her heart strangely calm. When the police arrived minutes later, they found her standing in the same spot, the gun resting loosely in her hand. She didn't resist, didn't speak. The only words that escaped her lips were whispered, barely audible over the sirens outside, words that no one in the room would ever forget. She said she hadn't wanted to kill them. She had only wanted them to understand her pain. The courtroom was silent as Emily Carter was led inside, her wrists bound in cold metal. Months had passed since the night of the shooting, yet the events remained vivid in the minds of everyone who had followed the case. Reporters crowded outside, their cameras flashing as they shouted her name. The story had spread beyond their town, capturing national attention: a wife discovering her husband's affair with his best friend, and a party that ended in blood. To the public, Emily was both a monster and a mystery. Some saw her as a broken woman pushed too far. Others saw her as a symbol of jealousy and rage. Inside, she sat motionless, her face pale and expressionless. Her eyes were hollow, distant, as if she were still trapped in the moment when everything had fallen apart. The prosecution painted a picture of cold, calculated revenge, describing how Emily had purchased the gun weeks before the incident and driven to the party with a plan. They spoke of her bitterness, her anger, and the way she had watched Daniel and Ryan from the shadows. To them, it was not a crime of passion, it was premeditated murder. Her defense told another story. They spoke of the years she had given to her marriage, of the deep betrayal that had shattered her sense of self. They described her as a woman who had lost everything: her husband, her home, her dignity, and had spiraled into a state of emotional collapse. They argued that she hadn't gone there to kill, only to confront, and that her mind had broken under the weight of heartbreak and humiliation. When the defense presented the text messages between Daniel and Ryan, the courtroom murmured with shock. Words of intimacy and deception filled the air, each one cutting deeper than the last. Even then, Emily didn't cry. Her face remained still, her eyes staring blankly ahead as if she had already accepted her fate. When the verdict was finally read, time seemed to stop. The jury found her guilty of second-degree murder. She didn't flinch, didn't plead only, nodded once, slowly, as though she had been expecting it all along. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison. Her sister wept quietly from the gallery, but Emily walked out without looking back. The flash of cameras followed her as she was escorted into the waiting van. Her life, as she had known it, officially over. Prison became a world of silence. Days turned into months, and months into years. Emily spent most of her time alone, refusing interviews and visitors. She kept a small notebook where she wrote down her thoughts, but never about the shooting, only about what led to it. She often wondered if Daniel and Ryan had truly loved each other, or if their connection had been born out of secrecy and guilt. She questioned whether she would have forgiven them if she had simply walked away that night, instead of letting her rage consume her. The true crime documentaries that told her story portrayed her as both villain and victim, but no version ever felt completely true. Inside her cell, Emily lived quietly, haunted by what she had done and what she had lost. In the stillness of those long nights, she came to understand that revenge had not brought her peace, only emptiness. The party that had once symbolized betrayal had become the moment that defined her forever. And though the world eventually moved on, Emily remained frozen in that night, trapped between love and fury, where forgiveness had never been possible.